Good afternoon, everybody. I'm DeSoto Brown, Bishop Museum historian from Bishop Museum Archives. It's time for Throwback Thursday. That phone is ringing, but we're just going to have to let it ring in the background. We just had a technical problem. I started out at the beginning of a previous session and it didn't quite take. So we're going to start all over again. And the question today, or the question, not really a question, but the invitation today is, would you like to go on a sea cruise? Well, the reason that I'm talking about this is not so much what would the cruise be like, but how would you find out about the sea cruise? How would you decide to take a trip to the Hawaiian Islands on a ship back in, say, the 1930s? And if you had done that and you were in the continental United States, you would probably have gone on the Matson Navigation Company ships, which not only traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, but through the rest of the Pacific as well. And the way people found out about these cruises was Matson put out some really amazing publicity pieces. So that's what I'm going to show you, what some of those look like. And so to begin with, here is something from 1935. Is that correct? Yes, this was published in 1935. And as you can see, it's called Matson Travel Offerings. Now, this is a small version of what was actually a very much larger piece, which was issued. This is the preliminary one to get people excited and interested. And the artwork was done by a famous commercial artist whose name was Frank Macintosh. He had been working since the early 1920s, and in the middle 1930s he was hired by Matson. He did a number of pieces which all look similar to this. The thing that people are most familiar with by Frank Macintosh are the menu covers that were in use on the Matson ships from 1937 to about 1947. They looked very similar to this. He was an airbrush artist. He worked with these very bright, wonderful colors, and he tended to want to depict Polynesian or Hawaiian women looking really dreamy and very elongated and unrealistic, but really very beautiful. So here's the Frank Macintosh piece that you may be familiar with his menus, but here's something that shows you what the other stuff did, that the other stuff that he did looked like. All right. Continuing in the Matson Travel Offerings mode, here's one of the full-size ones. This is from 1937, and it has a photograph. It doesn't have artwork on the cover, and the lady on the cover is someone who became a good friend of mine. Her name was Pualani Mossman Avon. Pualani was a very well-known, very beautiful, and very skilled hula dancer in the 1930s. She worked at a place called Lalani Hawaiian Village, which was located in Waikiki, and it was run by her parents. Her father, George Mossman, started the village in 1932. It was right on Kalakaua Avenue, and it was the first place in Waikiki to have a regular weekly luau's. It was also a place that was built to resemble a traditional Hawaiian village, and it also was a place where they gave lessons in speaking Hawaiian, and also hula lessons, which Pualani gave, as well as the tourist things like the weekly luau. And in 1937, Pualani moved to New York City to be a dancer at the Hawaiian Room nightclub at the Lexington Hotel. She ended up marrying the accountant of the hotel and staying on the mainland for the rest of her life. But throughout the 1930s, she was the main Matson Navigation Company poster girl, or the woman who was used in their advertising. Here, from a little bit later, the summer of 1937, is another Matson Travel Offering booklet or brochure, and you can see that these things are really large. They unfold into being really large pieces. Very expensive. They're full color. So you can tell that Matson was doing very well at that time, even though it was sort of the tail end of the Depression, because the quality and the size and the amount of production they did for these pieces was really extensive. Now, if you look at the cover of this, it is a pretty picture of this Hawaiian lady looking at the bunch of bananas, but does it really depict real life? I mean, were there women just walking around looking like this in Hawaii in 1937? No, there were not. But it really successfully gets across the idea of Hawaii as a tropical paradise and makes you want to come out here, doesn't it? Well, this piece from 1940 is interesting because if you look on the cover, there aren't any pretty girls. There's nothing looking particularly Hawaiian or tropical about this, but what there is a very prominent American flag. And that is because by the time this was published, the Atlantic Ocean was not really someplace where people were taking trips for pleasure, because the war in Europe was going on by then, and Germany had taken over a lot of the countries in continental Europe, including France, and was actively attacking Britain. So people were not going across the Atlantic just for tourist trips anymore. However, the Pacific Ocean, there was no war yet. So Matson advertising emphasized that you could take a trip on the Pacific Ocean where there wasn't any danger of submarines blowing anything up. And that's because American ships were safe in the Pacific, thus the big American flag. Of course, that was going to end with the Japanese attack of the island of Oahu on December 7th, 1941, and then the Pacific Ocean, like the Atlantic, was not going to be available for any tourist use for up until the end of the war in 1945. Well, finally, here is one of these really big Matson travel offerings brochures. This is 1936, and on the cover we've got a picture of a lady on board one of the Matson ships, and you can see that see how wonderful and massive and majestic looking the ship is. But I want to just briefly show you how big this thing is, because that's the cover, and then you can unfold it once, and there's a pretty lady sitting on the beach at Waikiki, and then you can unfold it again, and there's a Matson ship, and then you can unfold it again, and there's a huge poster-sized interior picture, and then you can unfold it even one more time. And look at this thing. You can't even see me because I'm covered up by how huge it is. And so when you think about it, remember that this was something that they would have given away for free at one of their offices. So that's a huge production, and isn't that amazing? Well, yes it is. All right, now it's time for this week's historical question. And I'm taking this information from this little brochure, which gives the information on not only the schedule of the Matson ships going throughout the Pacific, but it also gives the costs of how much it cost to take a trip on a Matson ship. And so I'm looking inside this thing, and I'm going to ask you a question. Going to the Hawaiian Islands from either San Francisco or Los Angeles in 1940, the lowest fare was $85 one way, and that way you just got a berth in a room. You just got a place to sleep. You didn't get your own room. Most people, however, were in a first-class cabin, and the lowest price for that was $125 per person one way. Now, here's the question. What was the biggest, highest cost that you could pay on a Matson ship to come to Hawaii in 1940? Was it $200? Was it $500? Was it $1,200? And that highest price that you have to guess was for a suite. And that means not only did you have a bedroom, but you have a sitting room, you had a lanai, and all the finer things in life. $200, $500, or $1,200. And remember, these are dollars in 1940. They were worth a great deal more than they are now. So there's your question. So that brings us to the end of our Throwback Thursday for today. And I'm speaking to you from Bishop Museum Archives. And if you can come in person to Bishop Museum, we would love for you to do that and see what's going on here. If you can't come in person, or if you want to see what's going on here, you just come to our website and you find out what exhibits are happening right now and what our schedules are and all the fabulous, wonderful, and exciting things you can do here at Bishop Museum. So again, I'm DeSoto Brown, the Bishop Museum historian, speaking to you from Bishop Museum Archives. And that's Throwback Thursday. I'll see you again for another Throwback Thursday next week. Until that time, aloha.